Hello, everybody. My name is Walker Morrison, and today I'll be presenting on how different temperatures, specifically hot and cold, affect our body's metabolism and how many calories we burn during physical activity. Originally, this article was to support military readiness in cold environments, so it is focused on military takeaways, but this can also be for athletes, trainers, and anyone interested in exercise. A little introduction. Like I said, this study was done to understand military performance in extreme cold environments. No matter where you're at, whether it's hot or cold, environment temperatures are going to affect how your body um, performs in exercise, whether it's hot versus cold. But cold weather puts extreme stress on your body. And not only does it make it more difficult to move, but it also burns extra energy as you are performing in colder environment. Maybe that's through hormones or thermoregulation and shivering and non-shivering thermoregulation. Um, we're, this research is basically seeing what factors are increasing the demand of these hormones and what was done to improve performance or safety for the military. And then from what we know, heat does increase heart rate, which could lead to more calories burned, but also cardiovascular stress, most importantly. And from this article, I want to see kind of the difference between calorie burn of cold versus hot. Some methods. So this is military, so participants are going to perform physical workloads, military workloads, in cold air and cold water. And to see how many calories were burned and how much energy was used in lab conditions. But these adults were asked to walk in cold water and walk in cold air, um, relevant to what the military was going to be seen, and basically just testing their VO2, how much oxygen was going to be consumed. And they also did doubly labeled water, which is heavier hydrogen and heavier oxygen put into their drink, and basically through urine these scientists could see, or researchers could see, how fast it left their body, and then by these samples they could see how many calories were being burned a day, or total daily energy expenditure, and what that was. And what they were seeing is some of the soldiers were up to 6,000 calories a day. And just by thinking about that, that is an insane amount of calories, and what kind of nutrition and what their diet had to have looked like to just maintain their body in sanity, basically. And then what they found was cold water led to higher energy demands, and they lost more energy being in the cold water. And you can see on this graph, um, through the cold air, they burned about 225 watts of energy, and then in cold water, it's about 350. And this is because water um, is 25 times um, faster at pulling heat from the body than ambient air. And so your body's working that much harder to replace what was needed, and needs to boost everything up because it has to repair itself that much quicker, leading to more energy loss. And that kind of explains when you get into a pool and it's freezing and someone says it's 70 degrees and it doesn't feel 70 degrees, is because ambient air in water is completely different, because that water is pulling your energy and heat that much faster than air is. A discussion about what the results that we found. Obviously, cold exposure caused great energy expenditure, and the body activates the hormone control and thermogenesis, releasing more norepinephrine and thyroxine, which boost metabolic rate along with you warming up your body, losing more energy. And what we found is even though heat may raise your heart rate, it doesn't necessarily increase calorie burn. And then the military used these findings, just a little side fact, to support cold weather operations. They ended up getting clothing that was lighter but kept them warmer so they weren't using so much energy to just keep themselves alive. And then backpacks that placed weight on the hips so they weren't getting fatigued and using all this energy while their body's trying to keep them alive. So basically, why not heat? I know specifically when I'm working out in the heat, why isn't my body burning more calories in the cold where it feels a little bit easier? And basically, your body's making adaptations, the same extreme adaptations to cold as it is to the heat. And your body is trying to cool off as quick as possible instead of heat up. And so your body vasodilates and sweats. And instead of your blood going to the muscles, what they found is it's going to your skin, and it's called cardiovascular drift. And because the blood isn't going to your muscles, you lose out in performance, making exercise extremely hard, but not increasing metabolic rate. And then brown fat is not burned, and brown fat is very dense in mitochondria, which leads to fat burning. But also, your heart rate is super high, so you are also not burning fat either. And you are going to tap out very fast because your lactate threshold is going to be reached, and you will have a 5-minute workout instead of a 25-minute workout. To conclude, especially in cold water, you'll see significantly increased calorie use in heat than in heat during physical work. And this happens because of thermoregulation and just high demands from your hormones and from shivering. Your body's working so hard to heat up. And then just because this article is mostly about being more efficient with caloric burn in the military and to find ways to prevent them from overburning, this can be used in our exercise science application, because if someone wants to burn more fat, you can put them in a colder environment, maybe not an extreme cold environment, to produce more fat burning tendencies. And then it really just depends on what your certain patient wants, but it will aid in fat loss and conditioning. But depending on what they want, cold and heat have they're two different approaches to exercise, both with pros and cons. Obviously, we found that cold supports caloric burn, but heat will increase cardiovascular stress, and maybe this will help with endurance and maybe soon help with cardiac output, and you will raise your lactate threshold. It does help with endurance, but you have to choose an environment that's safe. You have to know where you're going with things. You don't want to go to a 120-degree place and run a marathon, or go to Antarctica and literally lose a finger to frostbite. I know no one's thinking that extreme when they're training, but it really just depends on what each patient wants, and then to be safe about that. Here are the references. Just another conclusion about this article is I found it super interesting that this cold influence has that much of an effect, and it seems like it is best applied for fat burning loss. And we found a purpose in our exercise science life, and to kind of apply that to our world of the difference between heat and cold and how it affects our metabolism.